Hello and welcome to the first plenary session of the 62nd Annual Conference of ISLE. One of the most important sessions of the conference, the Presidential Address by Professor Alakh N, Sharma, Director Institute for Human Development. The topic of his address is Youth Employment and Unemployment in India, Issues and Challenges. This session is being chaired by Professor S. Mahendra Dev, who has been Director and Vice Chancellor Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research in Mumbai since 2010. Prior to this position, he was Chairman of the Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices, Ministry of Agriculture. He was also a member on the board of IFPRI. He got the prestigious Malcolm Adesai Award in 2016. He's the chairman of the Institute of Development Studies, Andhra Pradesh. He's a member of executive committees of numerous national and international bodies. He has around 150 research publications in national and international journals in the areas of agricultural development, poverty and public policy, inequality, food security, nutrition, employment guarantee schemes, social security, farm and non-farm employment. He has been consultant and advisor to many international organizations. He has recently received the Scotch Group Award for his contributions to development economics. Delhi School of Economics will be giving the Distinguished Alumni Award at their annual day function this year. To him, many, many congratulations, sir. And the reins of the session are in your hands now, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyanka. Friends, this is a special conference because Dr. Alakh Sharma is the conference president who has contributed immensely to in the last 3 decades or so or more to the Indian Society of Labor Economics and to the Indian Journal of Labor Economics. To this audience, I don't have to list his contributions to labor and other related fields. He has research mostly on the livelihoods, poverty, employment, labor markets, and development issues. And the Institute for Human Development, which started in, I think, late 90s, last 25 years, he is under his leadership. That institute has become very nationally very reputed institute working in issues of labor, agriculture, in development issues, several poverty. So he has contributed a lot for the institutional building, the Institute for Human Development. But his contributions, particularly to the Indian Journal of Labor Economics, is well known as editor. In fact, when I met Prof. Dantwala a few decades back, he said this journal is much better than many other journals because it not only talks about labor and other industrial relations and all, but more wider a kind of developmental issues, poverty, inequality, those kind of issues. So he was very happy with that. So he has widened the scope of the Indian Journal of Labor Economics to more like development issues. And also the Institute, the Indian Journal of Human Development is also well known and its quality is very high. He has developed that also. And his some of the things he has done in Human Development Institute and also to the Labor Economics Journal. I mean, globally, it is recognized as the quality. And this conference is also capacity building for the young scholars because they tend to meet well-known labor economists and development economists in these conferences. So I thank him for all these contributions over the years. And he's also selected an important topic, which is a burning issue, the youth unemployment across the world. As you know, it's 3 times to the general unemployment, youth unemployment. So he's looking at various aspects of the youth employment and employment in his lecture. So with this, I invite him to deliver the presidential address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mahendra Dev, for your generous introduction. I'm thanking the Indian Society of Labor Economics and its members for bestowing me the honor of being the president of the 62nd Annual Conference of the Society. this sense of honor is magnified by the fact that many of India's outstanding economists and public personalities have been my predecessors who delivered the presidential addresses. While I humbly believe that I can in no way compare to them, I have tried to contribute my best to the Indian Society of Labor Economics and its journal for the last 3 decades. I have thus perhaps been given this honor in view of my close association with the society. For my address, I have chosen as Professor Mahendra Dev just mentioned, a very relevant contemporary topic, youth employment and unemployment in India. I need not emphasize that employment is one of the top issues dominating the current academic and policy discourse in the country. The overall open unemployment rate in India over the last several decades has been hovering around 2 to 3% only. It has been one of the lowest in the world till very recently, when now it is in 2019-20, for the first time, it has become 5.8% for the working age population. It is still much lower than that prevailing in most of the developed countries. For example, in Canada, it is 9.5%, Italy 9.2%, Spain 15.5%, even USA, which has a lower rate, 8.1%, except only UK. Youth unemployment rate among the educated in India is 25%, about which I will come later on, which is significantly higher than the most developed and developing countries, except perhaps, again, Spain and South Africa. South Africa historically has been very high. So very interesting to witness unemployment rate, open unemployment rate low, but youth unemployment rate comparable to developed countries, and educated youth unemployment rate much more than developed and developing countries, except a few. So that is why this topic becomes very important for us. Before coming to I will come in detail on employment and unemployment. Let me just give you a broad view of youth and demographic transition in India. As you can see from this slide, youth, by the way, India still is one of the youngest nations of the world, with average age of 28.4 years and account for 1/5 of the total youth in the world. While in many countries of the world, particularly developed ones, number of elderly people have increased steadily, India, in contrast, has bucked this trend with its young and working age population. India has already achieved the demographic advantage with a high share of its working population and will remain in this demographic zone for at least another decade. But as you can see from this slide, youth population now in India is declining. It was around 28% in 2011, had come down to around 27% in 21. In 2031, it is expected to be 24%, and in 2036, 23%. In the slide, you can see the working age population has been increasing from 60% in 2011. It is expected to increase to 64% in 2031. After that, it will be constant. It's likely to be constant. And old population is also here increasing. So this working age advantage, which is called demographic advantage, will be for some time to come, maybe 10, 12 years more. So it is very important to see that we are not going to have what we say demographic dividend, or I'm calling it demographic advantage for the next 10 years only. It has very massive implications for India's development. Youth contribute to roughly 34-35% of the total GDP. And now its share in population is declining. But even then, youth in India, at least compared to the developed countries and many developing countries, for the next 12 years, it will be adding to the labor force. So we have to exploit this advantage in our favor. That is very important. In this paper, which is a copy of which is in your bag, it is of course still very draft and will be revised. But what I have done, I have defined youth, and not I have defined, it is generally defined also in comparison to, for giving international comparison, 15-29 years. And I have used mostly National Sample Survey data, this UPS basis, usual principal status, which is a very stable measure of employment and unemployment in India. And youth, for youth, and particularly for educated youth, is the most established measure. So much on the data. Now, coming to education level of the youth, over the years, substantial improvement in education of youth has taken place. You can see from the graph that compared to 1983, illiteracy level among youth has come down from 45% to now just 7%. Above secondary education, which is very, very critical for employment and of course youth employment, above secondary level education, now 57% of the youth have secondary education. It was only 14% in 1983. But still we have in India something like 36% of the youth who are below secondary education. So if you add the illiterate, something like 43% youth are still not having adequate education. And it is a matter of concern. But good thing is that it is happening at a faster rate. There is a gender disparity, which is not coming here. When you see rural, urban, male, female, there is a disparity. But again, good thing is that more women are, more and more percentage of women getting above secondary education, above graduates, it is increasing faster than men. And now in urban areas, women with graduates and men with graduates are almost equal. So this is a very, very good, healthy trend. In next slide is enrollment in higher education and formal skill training. Again, this is, as I told you just now, male and female there's a difference, but gap is narrowing, and trends are at least in favor of women. But an important thing, which the right side of the slide, you see, it is about formal skill training. India has taken several measures for skill training. Ministry of Skill Development, Entrepreneurship, so many skill programs. But even now, only 4.1% of the youth have formal skill training in the country. There is male and female difference. Male are 3.8%, female are 3.2%. And it is, in developed countries, the percentage ranges between 60 to 70%. So this is, of course, it is also widely recognized that NSS data probably does not capture fully the skill levels in the country, particularly informal skills. But discounting that, there is no doubt that in India, we have a very, very low skill level among youth or among workers. So it is a matter of concern about which I will come in more detail later on. But before I come again in detail with youth employment and employment, educated youth and employment, and other features, let me point out some stylized facts about Indian labor market. This, what has happened to, what are the characteristics of Indian labor market is very key in formulating policies and programs for employment and youth employment. So let me just quickly tell you, and this audience, of course, knows this, but this is just to put these things in context. The high economic growth during the last 3 decades, India has become turned into a lower middle income country from poor income country. But our labor market conditions have not substantially changed. Still, India has rather most of the characteristics prevalent in a poor developing countries. And one characteristic which I had pointed out in the beginning, it is low open unemployment rate, although it has risen during last 5 or 8 years. In India, the second feature, share of GDP in agriculture has fallen very considerably. Now it is, it was around 15% in 2019-20, but close to 44-45% of the total workforce are still engaged in agriculture. This is among highest in the world. You know, everybody knows that Europe, USA, something like 4% workers are engaged in agriculture. So, and in comparison to other developing countries also, except few, South Asia, Arab and all that, this rate is higher among these developing countries also. Another fact, our urbanization level is again one of the lowest in the world, around 30%. Another important feature to mention, you know everything, but I'm just putting it in a context to see, to talk about the youth employment later on. High degree of informality. 90%, again, it is one of the highest in the world. Even in non-agricultural sector, around 3/4 of the workers are informal. The labor market is also characterized by high level of segmentation in terms of gender, rural, urban, regional location, as well as social groups. Female workforce participation, one of the lowest in the world, although gender gap in labor market, in several spheres, it is narrowing down, except workforce participation. Labor productivity is low. Lastly, and it is very important to, of course, you know it also, the Indian development part is somewhat different from what the developed countries experienced in their development experience. From agriculture to industry, industry to services. In India, it is contrary. Manufacturing has not been the engine of growth. Our manufacturing share far behind China, of course, now East Asian countries who developed later on, and historical experiences of the developed countries. So agriculture to services, and in my view, and several other economists have pointed out, this is a characteristic feature due to which high level of informality has prevailed, and also slower employment growth has taken place. So now let me come to again the central topic about youth. Now I come to some facts about population, labor force, and workforce. Youth population and labor force and workforce. As you can see from the this graph, youth population comprises 43% of the total population at 369 million, and adults constitute 57%, something like 491 billion. Labor force for working age is estimated at 474 million, which includes 145 million youth and 329 million adults. Important thing to notice here is that huge difference is there in population and labor force growth of youth and adults. Population growth of youth is far less than that of labor force, while labor force growth is higher than population growth in case of adults. A large number of young people are not into the labor market. This implies the nut and shell, this is the conclusion. And that is mainly because of they are joining in larger numbers in educational institutions. So youth and adult workforce presents a contradictory trend. Around 62 million additional adults joined workforce between 2011-12 and 2019-20, while a reduction of 6 million in youth workforce took place. And there has been rise in unemployed youth in recent years from 10 million in 2011-12 when you see labor force participation rate and workforce participation rate, you can see that left side is labor force, right is workforce. You can see that labor force participation rate and workforce participation rate of adults more than youth, and among youth in age cohort of 20-29 years than 15-19. Labor force participation rate and work participation rate of among females considerably lower than more males. Labor force participation rate of youth fell marginally between 11 and 12 and 19-20, but workforce participation rate of youth declined substantially. This is important to note. Just to elaborate more, if you see this graph, you'll find that educational attainment is a key determinant of labor market outcomes. It is showing U-shaped curve, U-shaped relationship between educational levels and workforce participation rate, as well as labor force participation rate. This indicates that youth in India with low level of education participate in larger numbers in labor market. This is again a very, very characteristic feature of a poor developing country. They are generally poor, so whatever work opportunities are there, they are engaged in, they don't have bargaining power. Whereas after completing their secondary education, their aspirations level go up and they tend to wait for better employment opportunity and hence unemployment level rises. So this is as I said, characteristic feature of the poor developing countries. I won't devote more time on this slide. This shows the employment status, self-employed, regular workers, and casual workers. Lately, in 10 years, rather after 2005-6, the percentage of workers employed as regular workers, and I'm talking about now youth, is rising. But important thing is that those getting regular employment, they are mostly 80% of them are in informal employment. Something like 43%, sorry, large number of them don't have any social security, and 80% of them are informal. On an average, a self-employed youth worker earns a daily income of rupees 566, according to data in 2019-10. By the way, as you know, for the first time, NSS has collected data on earnings. Widely believed that it is underestimated. But even then, what you can see that there is a large gap between earnings of, I'm not getting with the figures, earning of male workers. First of all, it is quite low, maybe underestimated, but even then, wide gap between male earning and female earning, either in regular employment or self-employment. Again, I won't say much about youth are around 35% of the youth still are in agriculture, but general population adults, it is 45%. So youth are moving from agriculture to non-agriculture. But again, females are still much more in agriculture. They are 48% youth female, young women are in agriculture. So male are going more to non-agriculture and particularly to more remunerative sectors compared to the male. Later on, next slide, this skill level and occupations. Again, I don't have much time, probably 10, 12 minutes or 15 minutes. So I would just give the characteristics, the main trends of this slide. Very high proportion of youth are engaged in low-skilled occupations, around 65%. Clerical, service workers, shop and market sellers, craft and related work, followed by unskilled and elementary skills. And only 5% of the youth, employed youth, are in high skilled, and something 4.7% in skilled occupations like associate professional. You can on the written paper you'll find these figures. Similarly, there is rise in share of medium and high skilled jobs, particularly among this is a healthy trend as women are getting more and more educated. their share is rising in medium and high skill jobs, particularly among young women, showing increasing demand for highly skilled people. Youth unemployment rate is something like 16.6%. For age group, it is much higher, 15-19, something like 21%, 22%. And but for adults, it is minimal, and for overall population, only 5.8%. This shows the share of educated youth unemployment in total unemployment. As the youth are getting more and more educated, this slide simply shows how critical is educated youth unemployment in the country. Now, nearly 66%, 2/3 of the total unemployment is constituted by the educated youth. And among females, 75% of the total unemployed women are educated women. And when I say educated, it is secondary and above education. So, you can see it was only 37% in 1983. So, so keep in mind, we are giving more education, more and more people, youth are coming out with education, but trend in educated unemployment is rising very fastly. The other feature is, this concept of not in employment, education and training, NEET. This proportion is very high in India. 1/3 of the youth are in NEET category, not in employment, education and training. They are out of labor force or unemployed. So NEET category, females are something like 56% and males 15%. NEET unemployed dominated by males, while NEET out of labor force dominated by females. And female category is very vulnerable compared to the male category. I will now come to just to some concluding 2-3 slides. One is challenge of future job creation. India needs to create something like 90 million non-farm jobs between 2023 and 2030. The net employment rate needs to grow 1.5% from 2023 to 2030 to achieve something like 8.5% GDP growth. This slide is based on the population projections by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And you can see that it gives the description of population in 2030, 2036, labor force growth, workforce growth, unemployed. The key conclusion is that on the basis of present scenario, prevailing workforce participation rate, India will have to create 4 million jobs between 2023 and 2030. If we have higher ambition, because labor force participation rate of youth is likely to go up, as they in the slide they saw that with education, labor force participation rate increases. So in that scenario, if we assume that labor force participation rate will be 50%, then we have to create 9 million jobs per year. which is very, very high. So this gives the challenge. I have tried to give a regional picture where the youth unemployment rate or employment challenge is more. And I have taken regional differences in youth employment, 4 or 5 variables, something like educated youth percentage, their population, workforce participation, regular employment, educated youth unemployed, need, and then calculated a average composite index. What we find that there are 2 groups of states. One group, Rajasthan, Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, which I call group 1 state, they have significantly high youth and working age population. But they have lower GDP, all these characteristics, low employment growth, all that is happening. The other group is Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Gujarat, Maharashtra, southern and western states. Their challenges in the first category of states. Employment creation, probably it has to be led by labor-intensive growth, may not be high-quality employment because education is less. But in the other categories of state, the challenge of is more to create more quality jobs, and they are educated youth are being educated more. So these are, you can see in detail in the papers. I am not, because of lack of time, telling you more about that. Lastly, I'm not venturing into any policy advice or anything, but at least 3, 4, 5 policy pointers. And I am not new person to give those pointers. We have also talked in IHD about it, and many more people have also talked about it. First of all, the challenge in future is going to be different from what was earlier, because more youth are going to be educated, and particularly women. So these 2 segments we have to keep in mind. The other challenge is this skill mismatch. So what India has, of course, responded, so many skills program, skill development ministry, all that has happened, several programs, Narega to National Livelihood Mission, all these happening. But in my view, the challenge, and as I had told you, those challenges, the challenge is so huge that it needs innovative thinking. And again, this is not the original suggestion that I am giving you. There is a need of employment-focused development planning, integration between macro, different ministry integration with employment and all that. So I'm not going to detail, but this is one. The other is, as I pointed out, 80% of the youth, new youth who are getting jobs in formal sector. This something formalization of the informal workers. Several countries have tried in developing countries with good results, and India has to do. ILO has a important program and focus on this. The other is need to urgently formulate appropriate policy and measures to address the issue of education and skill education. The need for augmenting the quality of education. I had told you, I had probably not mentioned, you see, one characteristic feature of Indian youth employment is that in developed countries, unemployment rate among more educated youth is lower than, say, low matriculate or secondary education. But in India, unemployment rate among graduates and technical graduates is higher than the matriculates and all that. This is contrary to the developed country. And this is mainly because of the poor quality of education. So we have to do a lot on improving our quality of education. And I would not dwell more. It is well known, our university system, we do not perform well in university ranking and all that. Then because of lack of time, I'm not going into NEET category, but urbanization and migration, and particularly in the context of female employment, it is more and more women are going to join workforce. There should be need of proper urban planning, migration planning, as more and more educated women and men are going to come. Lastly, labor markets are becoming more and more complex. With digitization, technological development, the complexity is increasing more. And our labor market information system is not keeping pace to these changes. Labor market statistics are still poor. We don't have proper statistics. So strengthening the statistical system, mapping those developments in the labor market is key to any planning, employment planning, as well as formulating any employment policy. Friends, just these are 3-4 points. There are many suggestions, many things which are needed. I think youth employment and labor market statistics, Indian Society of Labor Economics has to devote more time, more resources, more people have to undertake this problem of youth unemployment, labor market statistics. This is a very challenging topic. I hope the Indian Society of Labor Economics and all those people who are involved in labor studies will devote much time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Alakh Sharma, for very good presidential address. You know, this he has probably, due to lack of time, he didn't present some of the things in the presidential address. It's there, but if we see the, some good things are happening in the youth employment side also. For example, the education of youth has been increasing for both females and males. Women with graduates also is increasing. And in general, of course, he said the demographic advantage will be there for at least for a decade or so. For the working age population. But some of the worried things are, of course, the youth unemployment is around 25% or so, which is one of the highest among the countries. And female work participation, whether it is general or youth, it is one of the lowest probably among the developing countries, including comparing with Bangladesh and other countries where it's much higher, the female participation rates. Then he talked about the U-shaped kind of, the educational attainment. But here, this graduates, the workforce participation rates are increasing, but unemployment is also high. Along with the increase in the WPR, the unemployment among the graduates is also high. So both are going together. But in general, in India, although unemployment rate is high at 6% or 9%, but the working poor is also a problem, even among the youth. Many people are working at a very subsistence wages. So that's another aspect. Also, it talked about the NEET. The educated youth and employment constitutes about 66% of the total employment for males and about 75% for women, which is very. And lastly, on challenges of job creation, he has several suggestions. Also, the regional disparities in this job creation. Some states you have to have more quality, focus on quality rather than quantity. He also said that employment-based development planning. Anyway, we don't have planning now, so it's more development policies probably. Lastly, of course, the statistical data is very important for India. Still, for example, employment data is now up to date. It is the quarterly kind of thing, but consumption data still we don't have after 2011-12. Almost more than 10 years back we had. With this, I thank him once again for a very good presidential address. Thank you very much.